Life. And I got to say this is just on my mind, and this has nothing to do with what I'm going to read. But I happen to know that Dick bought a new Bible, right, Dick? New American Standard. And he did that because that's normally what I preach out of. And ironically, I just pulled one of the Pew Bibles out, which is an NIV. So, sorry about that, Dick. In Matthew chapter 5, there's what is called the Beatitudes. And these are familiar verses to us. It's part of Jesus's what's called the Sermon on the Mount. When he sat down on the side of the mountain, he began to teach. And if you read chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew, it is just amazing the things that Jesus covers within this sermon. I mean, it's definitely not an introduction, 3 points, a conclusion, and a prayer. That's not what Jesus does here. But he talks as though talking from the heart what he came to share with people his whole lifetime, what it was all about, and unfolds to them God's plan for them. And it's just amazing when you just read through this sermon that he preaches. And you can take so many varied points of this, or even just single verses of this, and look at those, and you could preach for a month on those, or study for a month on those in your home Bible study. And it's that way with this verse in verse 14, when he says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." I mean, when we got to the point of finally putting the batteries in, putting God in, I mean, we realize a simple thing like a battery in a flashlight, and it's going to take the battery for it to work. I mean, everybody knew when the dirty rag was out and you flipped it on that it wasn't going to come on. Everybody knew that it was going to be off because it didn't have the battery inside. I mean, how are we going to shine the light of God if we do not have God in us? If we do not have Jesus in us? I mean, this simple lesson that these kids grasp, we should be able to grasp as well. And so he says, "You're the light of the world." Now, ironically, when we look at passages that talk about light of the world, John chapter 1 talks about the light of the world, and who's he talking about? Not us, but Jesus. He's saying he was the light of the world. He came into the world. And he even says the light of the world came into the world, but the darkness didn't comprehend it. But over here, Jesus is saying about us, you are the light of the world. And it's because of God living in us. It's because of Jesus living in us. Galatians chapter 4 puts it this way, that he sends forth the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, "Abba, Father." This idea is that people see these lights, but they don't see us. It would be really interesting today. How many plan on eating out today? Can I ask that? How many plan on eating out today? I see it's okay. It's all right. Even if you're not eating out, I mean, to have these on, have them around your neck, have them on, see if you get any questions about it. I mean, what a thing to share with somebody who would ask, "What's the light for?" You know, they're probably going to be expecting an answer about Halloween. You know, it was last night. Well, it was left over from last night. I'm not done trick-or-treating, whatever. But that you can share with them why you are the light of the world. Not because of you, but because of the battery that's inside. And so we could use this as an object lesson even today as we go out from here. But I want us to look at Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25. This is kind of a little bit different slant on it, I guess, to some degree. Parables are stories that are told. We looked at a parable last week, even from the Old Testament, that would have been the earliest parable that we have recorded in the Bible. Ironically, when we got done last week and everything was over with, Bill said, "What do the trees have to do with it?" Well, the trees were the example in the parable, even as here he's going to talk about 10 young maidens. And in the process, he's not talking really about what happens to them. He's talking about us. And he's talking about being prepared. And it's a situation that has to do with a light, or several lights in this case. Chapter 25 of Matthew, verse 1. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied. "There may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were already went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Sir, sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." This has to do with the battery thing. You know, these batteries came from a place that you probably wouldn't expect them to last really long, and that's because they were cheap. I'm not sure if you leave this on clear to lunchtime that it will still be shining. It probably will. But if you leave this on a continual basis, what's going to happen to the light? It's going to go out. So what do you got to do? All right, take a battery home with you. Stick it in your pocket. All set. You can keep it on. It's being prepared, right? It's being ready. Would you want to go into a cave with just this one battery in here? I don't think I'd want to go into a cave with this one anyway, but you wouldn't want to do that, because if this thing went out, you'd be in trouble in there. The world is a dark place because of sin, because of what Satan has done with sin in people's lives. We don't want to go out into the world. And in this particular case, we have those who were making preparation for the bridegroom to come. And of course, as we see the analogies through Scriptures, we see the analogy of Jesus being the bridegroom and his return. But we want to be ready. We want to have our lights on. We want to be prepared, because it says they all fell asleep. I mean, he took a long time coming. And so they all fell asleep when it rang out. He's coming, and we live in a different culture. This was a totally different setup than what we're used to. But here came the bridegroom, and the sound was out. He's coming, and they all woke up and they began to trim their lamps. They getting ready, get the lamps bright. He's coming. We're going to go inside, and 5 of them don't have any oil. They didn't take anything extra with them. If we just come to a point that we believe in Jesus, that we know that he came to this earth, that we know that he even died a death on the cross, and that he rose again, and we believe in that. I mean, that's an exciting point. That's an exciting time, is it not? How many remember the time that they realized who Jesus was? Can you remember that? Wasn't that an exciting time? You realized what he had done. You realized who he was. What about being baptized? How many remember when they were baptized? You know, I think of David at a time when he was saying a prayer in a psalm, in Psalm 51, when he said, "Restore within me the joy of thy salvation." I mean, that's the time that I have to think of, is first accepting Jesus, first knowing who he was. But you know what? If you stopped there, if you just stopped there, is that going to make you ready? Is that going to make you last? We need to be willing to put the extra batteries in our pocket. We need to be willing to learn more of Jesus, take him into our life. I mean, Romans chapter 8, and this will probably be the last one we go to if the praise team wants to come on up here. Or rather, go to chapter 12, Romans chapter 12. He says it this way, verse 1, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship." He says, "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." This idea of transforming, it's not going to happen overnight. It's as we learn of him, as we begin to allow him to mold our life, that we discern between good and evil because we're using his word in our life. Like babies use milk and grow, we use the word within our life and we grow in Christ. And so with all of these things, looking at the light of the world, yes, it is Jesus. But he's wanting to shine through you. He is making you the light of the world. And you need to stay on. Because it's easy to run out of oil. And that's one reason we're here, isn't it? He's given us this not just as a time to worship him, but a time for us to be edified, a time for us to be built up together. And so as we do this together today, there may be somebody who says, "I need more oil. I need some help." And it's not too late. The bridegroom isn't here yet. He's here in us, but he hasn't returned. And so now is the time. Now is the time to prepare. So this is an invitation, if you will. I'm going to join the praise team. If you have a need to come, I'm going to ask one or two of our elders to come up here. You can have prayer. If you need to be baptized into Christ to start that joy of your salvation, even as the kids read to us, that there's that opportunity today. But if you need to just sit here and pray, or you need the congregation to pray with you, it's an invitation to those who may need to recharge, if you will, that we have that time that we can do that together this morning. So if you'd like, you may stand at this time.